Hi, welcome to Everyday NLP Bites, Season 4, Episode 5. If you haven't been watching or listening to earlier podcasts, my name is Florence Madden. I'm an NLP trainer and coach based in Cumbria in the north of England. I'm also the author of The Intention Impact Conundrum and the co-author of Everyday NLP. Throughout this series and last, I have been in conversation with, I've been talking to NLP coaches, trainers, people who've trained in NLP, or people who simply have an interest in NLP, and asking them all the same questions. What's been important to them in NLP, and more importantly still, how have they been able to use it in their life and work? Today, I'm thrilled to say I'm accompanied by Ali Smith. Ali is an NLP coach who trained with me a few years back now, and who is also specialising in PTSD, and she'll tell you a lot more about that. So I'll let Ali do more of an introduction to what she's all about, but I'm going to go over to Ali to say what's been important to you in NLP, and specifically, how have you been able to use it in your life and work? So over to you, Ali.
Thank you so much for a lovely introduction, and good morning, Florence, and good morning, everybody who's watching this. So I am a NLP coach. I've also trained in NNRT, which is Negative Neuropathway Reversal Therapy. I've trained in hypnotherapy as well. And as Florence correctly said, my interest and my passion is really working with clients who are suffering with anxiety and traumatic stress. So I would have to say, Florence, my favorite topic when it comes to NLP is submodalities. Okay. And this is something that I use a lot in my work with clients. And I also use it on myself, actually. So it's made a huge difference to both to me personally and in terms of the work that I do.
Okay. I'm pretty aware that a lot of people watching this will know what submodalities are, but there might also be a lot of people watching who have no idea. So what are submodalities?
Yeah, so first of all, I think sometimes people can overcomplicate the term submodalities, and I like to keep things really simple. Essentially, if you think of your 5 senses as modalities, so you have sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. And modalities are really how we experience life, or how we experience the world around us, how we take in information. We take in information through these main 5 senses. So these are modalities. Submodalities are essentially the qualities of each modality, and that's how I like to explain it. So if you had to chunk down your modalities, you would get your submodalities. So for example,
yeah. Sorry, I was going to just say, give us an example of a submodality of sight, for example.
Yeah, so for example, with sight, a submodality would be, is it in color or black and white? Is it moving or still? Is it clear? Is it blurry? Where is it? Is it near? Is it far? So in terms of hearing, is it loud or is it soft? You would notice the tonality as well. You would notice the direction of the sound, where it's coming from. Is it high pitched or not? And then you have your kinesthetic, which is essentially how do you experience it in terms of a feeling. So does it feel heavy? Does it feel light? Is there a shape associated? Is there a texture? Is there an intensity in the experience? So as I say, I use this a lot in my work with clients, especially when it comes to anxiety, and even working with post-traumatic stress, because often a client will say to me, I feel really, really anxious. And then I'll say, okay, whereabouts is that anxiety in the body? And then they'll sort of say, well, it's in my chest or it's in my gut. And then we'll explore it a little bit further. Does it have a color? Does it have a size? Is it moving? How does it feel? And you can really sort of get into the nitty-gritty of what that looks like, sounds like, and feels like for the client. And I find that being able to work with submodalities means that the clients can change those submodalities. And when you can change them, you can change the whole experience, and the meaning that you're giving to that.
Yeah, because we say in NLP that our memories and our thoughts have a structure to them. So what I'm hearing you say is the submodalities are really the structure of how we remember things. And I'm guessing that therefore how we hold that memory retain is a way that, not in a good way, but enables us to retain those bad feelings because we hold that memory in a particular way. Is that a way of...
Absolutely, yes, yes. I'll give you an example of a technique I use actually, which works really well. So if somebody presents with a problem, for example, they're feeling really anxious. I had a client who told me that she had this tight sensation in her chest, and when I asked her to describe it, she said it was black, and it was like a cauldron. Ooh. She described it as being a cauldron. It was bubbling away under the surface. Mm. And when I asked her whether it was hot or cold, she said it was hot. It was a cauldron. It was bubbling. And I said, well, what does that feel like? What's the emotion associated with that? And that was anger. We worked out that there was anger behind that. So what I like to do is I say to people, well, imagine that you have got your very own control panel. And you can imagine this, you can visualize this control panel in your mind's eye, however you want to. And we go into all the fine details about what the control panel looks like, the color of the levers and the buttons, etc. And then the client is able to change that, the cauldron or whatever it is. They're able to do whatever they want to do in order to change that. Mm. And so, in that particular instance, she was able to press a button, and by doing that, it caused that whole cauldron to sort of explode and evaporate and disappear.
Yeah. Wow.
And it just completely changed that whole experience for her. And what I like to do as well is get people to rate the intensity of their experience. So if they're feeling anxious, or if they're feeling sad or nervous or whatever it is, we always score that on a scale of 1 to 10. So 10 being really intense and 1 being, not at all. Yeah. And it's amazing how quickly that number comes down when you're able to sort of play with those images and those sounds and those feelings in your body and change them. And it really gives a client that sense of power. They are able to direct their experience instead of that experience directing them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love that metaphor that you're using of a control panel, because this is, to coin a phrase, someone taking back control of their own emotions rather than being driven by those emotions. And I think Oscar Wilde said something on that, to that effect, that he wanted to be enjoying his emotions, he wanted to be able to dominate them, he didn't want them to be dominating him. I don't think that's quite quoting him word for word, but it's pretty much that. Yes. Although Oscar Wilde, so far as I'm aware, wasn't into NLP in any way. So, as you know, we talk in NLP about interrupting patterns that don't serve us. So that sounds very much a kind of maybe a way of kind of labeling a lot of what you're doing is changing a pattern that isn't working for people.
Totally, yes. And what's interesting as well, Florence, as you know, the stress response manifests in our bodies. It's very much in the body, and that's why, again, working with submodalities, you're getting the client to get in touch with their body and where, exactly what's going on in terms of the sensations and the experience in their body, and being able to shift that and change that is really powerful.
Wow.
And I think it kind of links into somatic experiencing as well, which is something else I'm quite interested in.
Yeah, in one of the earlier podcasts, I spoke to Claire Bradshaw, who coaches in the outdoors, and she talked as well about that, and really echoes a lot of what you're saying there about people becoming much more aware of how they're experiencing things, and perhaps also much more trusting of their own body and the messages that they're getting.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm just curious, what drew you into working with PTSD and anxiety?
I would have to say it's all about my own history and my own past experience. So I was involved in a terrorist attack years ago, and I had a couple of other sort of traumatic events in short succession after that. And I think my experience of PTSD, I had my own therapy. I had something called EMDR, which is bilateral eye movement therapy, which works in a very similar way to NNRT, which is what I now do, which again is all about interrupting the pattern.
Yes.
And that is what drew me to, you know, the fact that I've been through that, and I know that you can recover from PTSD. You can get to that point in your life where you're able to reframe your experiences, and so I get a lot of joy from being able to help people do the same.
Yeah. Well, is that something that you normally share with your clients, or only if they ask?
Good question. Actually, it's not something. It's not something I would usually share unless they ask, and it depends on how well I know them. But yeah, if they ask me, I'm happy to say, you know, I've experienced the same.
Yeah.
I think sometimes you can build up a lot of trust and a lot of rapport with someone, but you know, their sessions are about them. They're not about me. So, but a lot of people are familiar with my story.
Yeah. Well, thank you for agreeing to share it with us today, and also taking us into submodalities. And say, I'm never quite sure who's watching or listening, whether people that are getting into NLP or people that are familiar. But it's actually really nice to be reminded of that as a concept, but also more importantly, how this can really be used to good effect for, if I may call them, everyday problems. And you know, people experiencing anxiety, perhaps a bit less PTSD, is an everyday experience for a lot of people.
Absolutely, especially now with what's happening in the world around us with COVID-19. You know, anxiety is a very, unfortunately, very common at the moment. So it's submodality shifting is a very powerful tool, definitely.
Well, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for doing this, Ali.
Welcome.
If people want to get in touch with you, what's your website or your email address?
Yeah, so my website is www.ali, which is spelled ali-smith.com.
Okay.
Email address is info@alismith.com.
Lovely, thank you. And obviously that will be in the paragraph that goes with this as well. So if anybody's not in a position to very quickly write down that website or email, they can access it there. Or as ever, people can always contact Ali through me as well, if for any reason they're not able to do it in any other way. So thank you very much to Ali for sharing that, and her own personal experience as well, for that matter. And thank you to you for watching or listening. Next week, I shall be speaking to in conversation with Sarah Rossell, who was my original NLP trainer. So I'm super excited about that. And it'll be kind of funny to have the boot on the other foot for me asking her those questions rather than the other way around. So thank you to all, and I hope I'll see you next week too. Bye for now.
Thanks, Florence. Bye-bye.